a passionate instigator and dynamic problem solver. Dr. Kevin Ross Emery, the host of the Dr. Kevin Radio Show, will be taking you outside the box, behind the curtain, and identifying the load of BS we are fed every day. And now, Dr. Kevin.
Hello, everyone. As you can tell, at least I assume you can, from the sound of my voice, I am not Dr. Kevin. I do believe Dr. Kevin will be joining us once he is able. I know that he was, I got a text message from him a little while ago saying he was landing at Logan Airport in Boston and that he would be getting on. He seemed optimistic that he'd be able to get on at the beginning of the show, but just in case, he wanted to know if I could carry the ball, to use a sports reference, which is very unusual for me because I'm not a sports fan. But, at the beginning of the show, at least until he was able to chime in. So my name is Matt Connarton. And, of course, if you are a regular listener of the Dr. Kevin Show, you know that I typically join Dr. Kevin the first Thursday of every month. And we have a political discussion. So there have been some occasions where I have guest hosted for Dr. Kevin because he wasn't able to be on, something came up and so forth. So I'm used to being here by myself. So it doesn't faze me. But like I said, I don't think this is going to be an instance where I'm going to be guest hosting the entire show. I think Dr. Kevin will be with us at some point. He just, as I said, he wasn't sure he would be able to make it right at the top of the hour. But anyway, so my name is Matt Connarton. I host a program called Matt Connarton Unleashed. I might as well take a moment, give myself a plug here. I am on live weekdays from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And my show is mostly political talk radio, although we do take some side streets and alleys and get into some other stuff, and sometimes it gets pretty wild, and my show today did too. So I'm, a political talk show host, but with maybe a little smidge of old school shock jock mixed in and lots of shenanigans. So I broadcast locally in Manchester, New Hampshire, which is where I am right now from the studio of WMNH 95.3 FM. But we also are syndicated on some stations, and of course, you can go to my website, mattconnerton.com, for all of your live streaming options and social media links and contact info and show archives, etc. mattconnerton.com. And I'll spell my last name for you, Connarton, because everyone gets it wrong. So we're heard on some stations domestically, and we just recently added Tomorrow Radio, which is an online station in Ireland, which is pretty exciting. So I'm of Irish descent myself, but although I do not have red hair, but it's pretty cool to be able to be heard there as well on a big station in the UK. So let's see. But so like I said, I think Dr. Kevin will be joining us. But in the meantime, because we discuss politics when I joined Dr. Kevin, and because that's what I'm used to talking about on my show, there is never a shortage of things going on politically, which is good and bad, depending on your point of view, or a mixture of both. It's, sort of an embarrassment of riches. There's always a lot to talk about, but sometimes a lot of it is very negative, unfortunately. But there's, we're never at a loss for a subject. Oh, Kevin's here.
Hey, Matt.
Hey. What's going on? Welcome to the Dr. Kevin Show. You're Dr. Kevin.
Well, thank you for having me. I so appreciate being on the Dr. Kevin Show. And thank you for covering me as I fought my way from O'Hare in Chicago to Logan to bus stops to everything else. So I appreciate you taking one for the team, so to speak, for the first few minutes.
Oh, of course. I'm kind of used to talking, whether it be into a microphone or a cell phone or whatever it is.
Well, there you go. So I'm sure you've welcomed everybody, but it just wouldn't be the same if I didn't welcome everybody to the Dr. Kevin Show here on the first Thursday of September here on OMTimes. And remember, we are a live call-in show, so you can call in at 202-570-7057. That's 202-570-7057. So, Mr. Matt, so I'm going to tell you, I'm going to kick the show right off before I see whatever it was you were talking about before I hopped on. I have discovered a new pet peeve, and I just wanted to share it with you because I knew you would appreciate it.
Okay.
So when was the last time that you actually flew?
Last time I flew? Oh, it's been years.
It's been years. Okay.
Yeah.
So I kind of had a feeling it had been a long time. But so one of the things is that, they have these cell phone parking lots now, right?
Oh, yes,
you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the cell phone lot. So if you're picking somebody up, you go and you wait in the cell phone lot. So you wait with the vehicle, so you don't have to pay for parking or get a ticket for hanging out at the terminal. And then when they, when your passenger gets off the plane, they call you or text you, and then you go pick them up.
Yeah, which I thought I was so excited when that happened. I mean, it's been around for a while now, and I mean, it's really kind of sort of a no-brainer. So we, and one of my new pet peeves is that we get off the plane. I'm going to, we booked first class, so we get our luggage early, we'd be the first one off the plane. You get your luggage the first. We're going to go get our bus to try to catch the bus, which would have been an hour before the bus that we ended up having to catch. And there were so many people that instead of going to the cell phone parking lot and just parking and waiting for their person, they had 3 of the 4 lanes in Logan shut down by cars sitting there idling, waiting for whoever. And I mean, it ended up causing us to miss our bus.
Oh, no.
So we had to wait for another bus.
Well, I have a question though. Why wasn't, because they usually run a pretty tight ship at Logan. Why wasn't Logan security telling these people, hey, you can't just sit here and wait? What was there? Was there no security?
Finally, somebody came, cleaned the place out after it was too late for us. But I stood there and watched 3 different cars that were like right close to where we were standing that I could see that were there no less than 25 minutes waiting for somebody to get off a plane.
Wow.
Just blocking. And finally, I mean, when we saw a state trooper supervisor go by, and, Jeff and I were in Chicago, so he was with me when we, I don't think I mentioned that Jeff and I were in Chicago, but so we, and it was already a cluster at that point, and I said, how come they're not stopping and cleaning it out? And Jeff's like, it says supervisor. I said, oh, so they're going to call somebody else to come clean it out. And it was still a good maybe 10 or 15 minutes after that when just driving by, if they just probably put on their blue lights and like beeped a little, they probably would have started moving.
Yeah.
Because everybody knows they're not supposed to be there. But I'm like, they created this whole cell phone parking lot so you don't have to do that. I mean, the poor buses were 3 lanes out, stopping to get people on, that then made everybody else even worse, and then buses had to try to go around them, and and I was just like, really? So anyways, my new pet peeve. Why can't you just have a tiny bit of respect that for the other people that are traveling that have buses and schedules and stuff, to not sit there and think that somehow you're privileged and get to sit there and play on your phone for 25, 35, 40 minutes or however long until the police officer comes. I was like, so much like, I just really wanted an on-the-foot police officer to be going up and down and handing tickets out for all the people that were there.
Yeah.
Like watching them for 5 minutes. Here's $100 ticket. You've been here for 5 minutes. Clearly, you're not supposed to be standing. There's the sign. Here's $100 ticket. See how many of those they passed out before they started going. That's what I'd like to see happen. So anyway.
I wonder if it's a situation where they don't have enough people to do that because there's such a labor shortage right now, and then you've got people kind of taking advantage of that, you know.
Yep. So our flight out was great. We flew on American. Like I said, I was just like, I'm getting in my old age, I'm just getting crotchety, I think. And I just booked first class. I was like, I can't wait in lines. I just can't sit in small seats. I'm on the wounded warrior list. I don't know if I was already wounded last time we talked or not.
I don't think so. You're wounded? What?
Yeah, I'm on the wounded warrior list. I thought I mentioned it. Maybe I didn't. I ended up with something called frozen shoulder.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of that?
I think I have. I think I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it.
So your shoulder is in two parts, so it can do all of that funky, like, go around and, like, happy dance all over the place with your arm.
Yeah.
And frozen shoulder is when the bottom part decides to crawl up inside of the top part, become inflamed and stuck, and you lose range of motion, and it's just, like, painful all the time.
Oh, God. Yeah, that sounds bad.
And, you know, and the only way to do it is to work at getting the inflammation down. And, like, I'm in physical therapy 2 to 3 times a week, you know, and it's kind of sort of, they try to yank it back out. We try to work around the inflammation. We're trying to retrain it. I got a little better, and then I went hiking, and which my physical therapist said I could go hiking. I just needed to be careful. Well, I was careful till I slipped on the rock, and I had to grab something with that arm so I didn't fall off, you know, the edge of Mount Major.
Oh, God. Yeah.
You know, and he said I could go kayaking, and I did. But, you know, then afterwards he was like, well, maybe that wasn't a good idea because you've definitely lost range of motion. So this thing is supposed to take a year or more to clear up.
Oh, wow.
So, so I'm definitely like, I got to keep moving it. If I don't move it a lot, like just like try to roll the shoulder and have some extra space, it gets stiff. And when it gets stiff, I can't, you know, like then it starts aching more and it hurts more and there's all sorts of other problems. So anyway, so booked, like I said, I booked first class, was really pleased. There was no like incidences or anything going over to Chicago. And we get there, you know, good. Everybody seemed to be following mask protocols and stuff like that. You saw a few people in Logan running around. And you saw people that worked for Logan that managed to, like, not ever stop anybody and call them on it, which I don't get because, you know, they announce it 5,000 times a minute and they have signs all over the place. And it's like, well, you're really not, like, doing a mask mandate that you have to do it to fly and you have to do it in the thing. If nobody says to anybody to stop the people that are wearing their mask on their chin.
Right.
I mean, you know, but coming back, we were pretty good in O'Hara, and in the airport where we were waiting, and it was definitely good because we take the train in from downtown out to the thing, and we get on the plane, and we're sitting in first class. There's somebody sitting in first class, and the mask is below the nose, and a stewardess and a steward walk by, and they don't keep saying something, and I'm kind of like, do I say something? Do I not say something? But Jeff is a type 1 diabetic. He has a compromised immune system. It is recycled air, even though I'm like, we're flying because the airlines say that they're creating the highest safety protocols, and so you got to friggin' enforce them. And I was like, and then this woman walks in with her mask around her neck, her full face, and they let her walk right by. And I felt bad for a second, I have to say. I felt bad for the guy that I talked to. Because I'm going to tell you, it was this older, slightly, not in great shape, older white man. And, the person with the mask down below his nose, that was a person of color. The other one was a woman. And I think that in this day and age, I think that old white men, if they're going to speak to women or people of color, sometimes have to actually be really careful because it blows up in their face. Because you know what I'm saying? I mean, there's this whole the defiance thing that happens, and it's like, but just follow the rules. So I called him over and I'm like, has the mask policy changed? And he's like, we're not the mask police. It's not our job. That's how fights get started. And I could see that this poor guy, I did feel bad for him because I'm like, he doesn't want to be doing this job. He probably doesn't even want to still be working. He looked like he was an age that he was past retirement to me, and maybe he might have been younger than I was, but he sure didn't look it. And you could just see it was like, I'm on my last nerve and I just don't have it. And then there was this lovely, tall, very well, I'm going to say well presented, but when somebody is like kind of tall and just presents themselves really like they're in their power. Yeah. They're attractive. Woman of color who was a stewardess, and she overheard what he said to me. And I don't know what she said to him, but she kind of went up and talked to him. And then she went through, and nobody gave her anything but a pull-up of a mask and an adjustment, and they didn't question her twice because she went up like a friggin' Amazon and very nicely was like, that needs to be up over the nose. That needs to be on if you want to fly. I mean, she was like, but her energy was just like, you aren't even going to think about giving me a hard time there.
Yeah.
So anyway, how are you these days? Now I've complained about my trip, though I had a wonderful time in Chicago.
Before you move on, what were you doing in Chicago? I'm curious because I used to spend when I was a child, I would spend the summers in Chicago with family.
Well, it was a working vacation. Jeff and I went in on Saturday, and we had a working vacation. And we just decided that, we needed to take some time, and we both love Chicago. And I have a timeshare, and we stayed right downtown at the Hotel Lake, which is right on Dearborn Ave. So we were 2 blocks away from Michigan Ave, which is, right around, right down there. And I will finish telling you about Chicago when we get back, and then we'll find out what's been going on in Matt's world. But stay tuned,
right.
and remember, it is a live call-in show, so call in and weigh in on mask mandates and inconsiderate people at airports here on the Dr. Kevin Show.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes. Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Coping-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Hello, and welcome back to the Dr. Kevin Show here on OMTimes. We're talking about mass airports, beat-up airline personnel, inconsiderate people at airports, and Chicago, that toddling town, with our co-host Matt Connarton. And we will be shortly shifting to the politics of the day, So Matt, originally this is the time of year they have the jazz festival, the big jazz festival.
Yeah.
And we've been there before for the jazz festival, but with the Delta variant, they decided they couldn't hold it again this year. So when we originally made our plans, we were going to be hitting the jazz festival as well. And the city was mostly open. We went to some great restaurants. I did manage to see about 15 hours of clients while I was there, working on my self-mastery through astrology class part of the time while I was, in between the part of the day I put aside for work. But we went to the Adler Planetarium and saw a great presentation on Imagine the Moon, with all sorts of interesting things like about the moon and the history of the moon and blah, 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 blah. And then another one called The Nighttime Sky, which was really fun in the planetarium. And it was a huge seating space, and they only let a few, like a minimum amount of people in. We walked along Michigan Ave. We did water taxis. We did the architectural boat tour going up the river. And I, logged in between walking from and Adler Planetarium to Navy Pier and back and everywhere else in between. I logged in 55 miles on my Apple Watch in 4 days.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah. It was really, I mean, I don't know how much you remember because you said you went there as a kid, but Chicago is such a walkable town.
Yeah, that's true. It is.
And now they've done the Riverwalk, which clearly has been since you were visiting Chicago that they've really completed the Riverwalk. So you can walk from the point of like where Adler Planetarium is, all the way on the south side of the city, all the way around Lake Michigan, all the way to Navy Pier, and then you can pick up the Riverwalk and you can walk all the way down to the juncture of the rivers. I mean, they've just got miles and miles of walking trails, and there's Millennium Park and Grant Park and of course, restaurants everywhere. And even though the jazz festival wasn't going on, there was music all over the place. So it was a great time.
Good.
Yeah. You should go back sometime when you're feeling restless.
Well, I used to, my mom, because my parents split up when I was pretty young, and then my mother lived in Manchester for a couple of years and then moved back to Chicago because that's where she grew up. That's where she was from originally. And so I'd spend the summers out there because per the custody agreement, my dad would take me to Logan Airport every summer, put me on a plane, and then I'd spend a couple of months in Chicago. But now my mother lives in Kenosha, Wisconsin, so I don't get out there as much. I don't know if you've ever been to Kenosha. It's not as exciting.
Kenosha, say that I have.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Oh boy, I tried.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's I mean, sometimes it's good to get away. A friend watched the house and took care of the kids, and sometimes you just need to get out of town for a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially because it's going to be a screamingly busy fall. So I'm gearing up for this fall.
Well, there you go.
What have been, so what's up with you these days? And what have been your hot topics? And I definitely have a few questions for you. But tell me what's been the hot topics.
My show, well, the biggest hot topic has been Afghanistan. We've also, of course, we continue to discuss COVID quite a bit. And I wanted to try to get to it on today's show and did not get to it. But, the new Texas abortion law, which is pretty unusual. But I would say, and of course, this guy, Crazy Joe, who calls my show quite a bit, but that's not really a political discussion, although it does get into deplatforming and so forth because Crazy Joe gets kicked off of every social media platform that he finds himself on. But he called my show today. That was interesting. But Afghanistan has really been the biggest subject on my show. I mean, that's kind of dominated everything.
Yep. So, yeah, that's been dominating a lot of stuff. What do you think? Now that we're out, I mean, we still obviously have connections there, but do you believe that we can actually stay out of being in a war for any length of time? Is this country capable of not being on any other war footing besides the war that we're experiencing right now within the country and the whole rebel forces known as white supremacy and trying to take it over and overthrow the government? Do you think we can manage that? Does this country know how to not be at war?
I think we might actually be learning how not to be in war. It is our greatest export, and, we always have a military presence on, every continent, I suppose, except Antarctica. But Trump, for all of his faults, there's very few nice things I can say about him, but there are a couple, maybe two or three. One of them is he didn't invade anybody. And he was kind of an anti-war, or at least presented himself as an anti-war guy. I mean, it looked like he was going to. Geez, at one point early in his presidency, it looked like he was ready to invade Venezuela, as bizarre as it seems, and did seem at the time. But you know, we didn't invade anybody. And then Biden comes in and takes us out of Afghanistan and hasn't chosen to invade anybody. I think as a country, we may have turned a corner in the sense that I think the country became at a point just very war weary. And, you know, overwhelmingly, according to polling data, Americans supported getting out of Afghanistan. I think a majority of Americans think it was a mistake to ever go in. Same with Iraq. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on our elected lawgivers and overlords to not be too aggressive in terms of war. But I also think, too, the nature of war is changing in that, you know, when I was, I mean, this was more than 20 years ago, Dr. Kevin. I remember, and I've mentioned this on my show. I don't recall if I've ever mentioned it on yours. But I remember reading books about how in the future, and again, this was at least 20 years ago, how in the future wars would be fought on the internet, on the World Wide Web, because there would be cyber attacks that different countries would be waging on each other. And that was kind of the future of warfare. And I remember a close friend of mine having a discussion with her about this at the time and what I'd been reading, and she kind of laughed at me and thought that was ridiculous. And, you know, but this is what's happening, you know, Russia. I mean, that's how we fight with Russia. Don't get me wrong. I would prefer fighting with Russia via cyber attacks than any kind of military exchange, because that could potentially escalate into a nuclear exchange. I mean, I'd prefer not to be fighting with Russia at all. Same with China. But I think the nature of war has changed, and so, or is changing, and so I think, you know, as voters have become so disillusioned with war, I think so have our politicians by necessity. So I guess that's a very long-winded way of saying, yes, actually, I think we can manage to not get ourselves into any more wars. You know, hopefully. I hope we can, at least.
So, well, and that's exactly where I was going to go, which is, I think it is, yeah, I mean, the war we have to fight now is the war of the web, the war of infiltration from there, and the war of the destruction of democracy that's being waged against us through these techniques that we have watched unfold over especially the last 6 years. You know, and it is, you know, to divide and conquer the American people through fueling hate and prejudice and divisiveness, and to turn us so much against each other that we just eat ourselves alive, and then our enemies get to declare victory.
Yes.
And that's what's happening. I mean, you know, we're watching it. We're watching the United States become more and more shattered, more and more falling into groups, and it's getting fueled, and it's getting fueled by our adversaries that benefit the fall of the U.S. And people just don't see it. Now, I do want to correct somebody. I do want to correct one thing you said. You said Trump didn't invade anyone. I think there's at least 30 or 35 women that want to argue with that. But he didn't invade any foreign countries. I just wanted to clarify the language.
Right. Yes. Yeah, of course. It is important to be precise. Yeah.
It is important to be precise because he certainly invaded lots of space in his day. It just wasn't foreign countries.
Right. Fair enough.
So now I wanted you to weigh in on, is it time for us to eliminate the Supreme Court's ability to do this shadow thing that seems to be the way in which they're handling things that they don't want to be held accountable to? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, I assume you're talking about the Texas decision.
Well, it's more than the Texas decision. I mean, they've done it in other ways where they don't actually have to like debate it or argue it. I'm trying to remember. It's called shadow something. But they have this whole thing where they can do this thing in private and basically kill something without actually having to take care of it. I mean, does that make? Do you know what I'm saying? God, I wish I remembered the term they used. But
yeah, I'm not sure the term you're looking for, but yeah, I mean, they have the they can decline to hear any case that they want to. They can let a case, just let something stand without hearing it. Certainly, yeah.
Well, there is this whole thing, and I'm going to have to see if I can find it. But I'll have to try to see if I can find it by next year. By next year, Matt. By next year.
Good. Well, that's something to look forward to.
I've seen it reported a couple of times. It's a certain kind of thing that they can do where they don't actually have to come out and state opinions and vote in an open way about stuff that allows them to be less than forthcoming.
Okay. I think I found it.
I'm going to try. Okay, good.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Vox Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Join me every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio for Vox Novus, the new voice.
If I could be you.
And you could be me?
For just 1 hour.
If you could find a way.
To get inside.
Each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Hello, and welcome back to the last segment of the Dr. Kevin Show here on the first Thursday of September. So, Matt, you think you found it?
Yeah, is it called a Shadow Docket? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, the Shadow Docket. There's been some discussion about it's time to release it's time to make them not that Congress can eliminate the Shadow Docket because it's something that they do that I'm trying to remember how it was described. We'll have to talk about it more next time. I've read a couple of things briefly, and frankly, my brain is just a little bit fried, and I'm not pulling it up because obviously, I got off a plane and a bus and hopped on a phone. Well, I was driving home.
There's a brief explanation that I found here. It says, the shadow docket is a term used by legal observers to describe the use of emergency orders and summary decisions by the Supreme Court without the opportunity of oral argument. So they just kind of decide something without going through a trial or a hearing, essentially.
Yes. And they have definitely started, and as we've gone into more of this conservative majority, which a lot of people are saying that the Supreme Court is questionably doing its job. So God knows they certainly didn't agree or back up everything Trump tried to get away with. But that they've been using this more and more to avoid the open discussions that would have to happen.
Yeah, there's an article. There's an article here from theguardian.com talking about how it's being used more and more. And I just scanning through it. Apparently, whether it's deciding the Remain in Mexico policy or on the eviction moratorium, they've been really putting this to use.
Yeah. And so I don't know, maybe both of us can look into it more and chat about it, but I found it as something interesting. What do you think? Is the Supreme Court out of touch with America, and does it need an adjustment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like this shadow docket thing. It seems to be a way to make the Supreme Court less transparent. I mean, I don't have a strong opinion about the idea of expanding the court, but I think it's an interesting idea, and I think it's something that maybe could be explored. I don't know that it ever will be. During the 2020 campaign, Trump and his surrogates would often say that the Biden administration would, if Biden got elected, that they would pack the court, meaning expanding the court. And then, because Trump got 3 Supreme Court justices on the court in just 4 years. So I think reforming the Supreme Court in some ways is an interesting idea, but not probably a particularly realistic one. I don't think it's something that will happen. I think that we're so institutionalist, myself included. I didn't realize how much of an institutionalist I really was until Trump showed up. And then I began to realize, I'm really an institutionalist in a lot of ways. That I think that this kind of change is extraordinarily difficult. And no one's going to win any elections campaigning on reforming the Supreme Court. It's not something most Americans even think about. They should be thinking about it, but it's not something most Americans think about, the Supreme Court. So I don't know. I think this should be addressed. It is a way for the court to avoid transparency, and I'm a bit of a transparency freak. I like the maximum amount of transparency possible. So I'm not happy to see this kind of thing going on.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it struck me when I saw it. Like I said, I just couldn't remember the word because my brain's a little fried right now. But I had read that article, the one you found, and I was like, what's the other word? It's shadow something. So thank you for finding it.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem. And Texas and this abortion thing, they finally figured out a way to basically make Roe versus Wade toothless. And do you think we're going to see 30 other states just do the Texas model to basically de facto make abortion illegal?
Well, we won't see 30 other states doing it, but we will see other states, I think, trying to do this. Yes. this is probably a roadmap for other states to be able to do this. And it's quite bizarre. I don't know. I mean, and it's amazing the Supreme Court in a 5-4 decision using the shadow docket method let this stand, what Texas has done. But I suppose it's brilliant in its malevolence, this concept of crafting a law in a way that would be so difficult to challenge in court, because it's not the government itself actually enforcing it, really. It's, people suing other people in civil court over abortions. This is wild stuff, and it's unprecedented. But I do believe other states will attempt to clone this, yes.
What do you think the way forward? Do you think there is a way forward? Do you look and go, this would be the counter to it, or this is what I think should happen? I mean, well, you've been doing political analysis for years, whether you call yourself a political analyst or not. Talk to me about what you think.
I'll be honest, I don't know. This is kind of still sinking in with me, to tell you the truth, because it's the way they've done this is so unusual and so bizarre and so unique. This concept of making it legal to sue anybody involved in an abortion. Hopefully, if people start taking advantage of that, hopefully some of these will be thrown out as frivolous lawsuits. But I don't think I've fully wrapped my head around it, to be honest with you. It's so different. It's very unusual what they've done here. Very unusual. But the scary thing is, there's no reason it couldn't work in other states. No reason I can think of, and that makes it very dangerous.
Well, I think I read something about 2/3 of the abortion clinics just canceled appointments and started shutting down in Texas because they were like, we can't. This makes it impossible for us to operate.
I believe it. Yeah, I believe that. I mean,
yeah.
What else can you do? I believe it. Absolutely.
So, okay. Well, by next month, I'm sure you'll have wrapped your head around it more. Because I look forward to having more discussions and to see what unfolds with this. Maybe we can pass a law that you can sue people that aren't wearing their mask, where masks are required. Hey,
there you go. I'd be in favor of that.
Yeah.
I'm
in favor of giving tickets to people that are parked in the no parking part of airports.
Right.
There's going to be some huge pendulum swing, because the majority of Americans are not against this minority movement. But the question is, at what cost, and how does or can this shift? And I don't have any answers either.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that, there's going to be, Trump was the bigot's response to Obama, the white man, the toxic white man. Not all white men. You're a white man. I'm a white man. We were thrilled Obama was in office. It isn't all of anything. It's the toxic, frightened white man. Got Trump in.
Mm-hmm.
And still don't get it. I mean, I still see posts and stuff like this that they don't really get And I'm watching it pass on. I'm watching young people making comments that are just really horrific, like brainwashed down through the generation, and you can't even talk to them, or they get like uber hostile, like they won't even have conversation. I have to say there is an increase of people that I'm willing to engage with on Facebook, because we can say we can agree to disagree. We both stated our opinion. We haven't changed it, but there's going to be no like attacks here. And so that's nice to see. Make any difference that Liz Cheney has been made second in command of this committee? And is this thing going to go anywhere? What do you think?
Yeah, it's going to go somewhere. I mean, Kevin McCarthy can try to make it as difficult as he wants to, but, he can't stop it. I know he was sort of threatening tech companies for complying with phone records requests and things like that. But I think it's great that Liz Cheney has been, given such a high-profile role in this. While her and I probably agree on very little politically because she's very conservative, I do respect and admire her for being willing to sacrifice her career, her political career, which she has. I don't know if she even fully realizes it, but she has. Her political career, I believe, is over. She will be primaried by a Trump-backed opponent in the next election, and she'll be out, and that'll be it. And Republicans will never forgive her for this. But good for her, and good for Adam Kinzinger for standing up for the truth and putting truth over party and putting truth over this maniacal cult that they're members of, but clearly don't want it to be a cult anymore. I mean, and, you can't change that. They can't change it from within, but they're standing up for the truth. Adam Kinzinger, his political career is over. I mean, his own family was so incensed when he initially voted for impeachment that they issued 2 letters publicly to Adam Kinzinger talking about how disappointed and angry they were with him. But he's sticking to his guns. And I think that's great. And I think it will make a difference. And the commission will go forward, and it needs to. And there's nothing Kevin McCarthy or Marjorie Taylor Greene or any of these other people can do about it. Jim Jordan, by the way, was put in an interesting position because he seemed very nervous at the idea of having those phone records subpoenaed. But it looks like the reason he was nervous, there's some new evidence to suggest, not because he was in cahoots in any way with the insurrectionists on that day, but rather that he was communicating with Trump and was actually trying to get Trump to call off the dogs. And he's in a tough spot either way, because if he, on the one hand, if he was in cahoots with the insurrectionists, that puts him in some legal jeopardy. But on the other hand, if he was kind of trying to do the right thing in a sense by asking Trump to call these people off, that puts him in a bad spot, because that puts him in a bad spot with Republican voters, because that means he was opposing Trump and not supporting the insurrection. So he's found himself in a tough spot. Not that I mind. It's great to watch him squirm. But yes, it will go. This investigation will go forward, and I think we're going to learn a lot.
Do you think that we could see either House of Rep or senators that end up getting charged?
That's probably unlikely, because thus far, I don't know of any evidence other than, some pretty weak circumstantial evidence. I don't know of any evidence that's come out that suggests that that any of these reps or senators, and by the way, if it were going to be anybody, it would be one of the reps, because the bar of entry for them to get into Congress is lower than a senator. But I don't know of any evidence that any of them was actively working in coordination with the rioters on that day. So no, I don't predict any of them will be charged with anything. That could change. Maybe we'll learn something damning, but no, I don't think so.
So I'm trying to remember what House of Rep. He's out of North Carolina. He's pretty rabid. He foams at the mouth. He was speaking just the other day to a group and made the comment of, get your guns ready. We're not going to use them for fishing and hunting. We're going to use them to take back our government or whatever.
Yeah, that's that freak Madison Cawthorn.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a bad guy.
Does that not... I mean, there's going to be some real questions about the difference between freedom of speech and inciting inciting a riot. I mean, inciting an insurrection. I mean, when you make public comments like that, and you're telling people that have already known to get violent, and these people are going to school board committee houses and threatening the local people that aren't supporting their agenda, that them and their family. I mean, there are death threats happening on the local level by these people, and they're getting away with it. How does that happen?
Yeah, it's pretty toxic stuff. Like nothing we've seen in our lifetimes, really. Yeah, it's bad, and it's scary. It's legitimately frightening.
Well, if we still have a country, I'll talk to you next month, Matt.
Sounds great. Thanks, Dr. Kevin. Thanks, everybody.